Hello, my name is Rafael Seif, and in this learning video about English grammar, we are going to see inversion and fronting. We will see the reasons why we use them. We will see different types, such as subject, auxiliary, or subject-verb inversion, and we will see the different elements that can experience fronting in a text. The idea is to understand the meaning of inversion and fronting, to know the purpose of the inversion and fronting of elements in English, and to know how to use these two aspects, inversion and fronting. They are both two ways of changing the normal word order in English, which is subject plus verb. Inversion, on the one hand, is the normal order in questions, but it is used to give emphasis in statements. For example, he was late and he didn't apologize. This is the normal thing. If we invert the action, it can be emphasized. Not only was he late, but he didn't apologize. On the other hand, fronting brings adjectives and adverbs at the beginning of the sentence. For example, instead of saying Charles was the least inspiring of the lot, we can say least inspiring of the lot was Charles. Then we have the emphasized adjective phrase. The most important way of inversion is subject plus subject and auxiliary inversion. And we can use them, this inversion in these expressions. After adverbs with restrictive meaning, such as hardly, scarcely, rarely, little, never, they can have restrictive or negative meaning. Little did we realize the true extent of the failure. Or never had they experienced such a behavior, or hardly had the inspector arrived when the bell rang. Here we have inversions. Only also is part of several structures for inversion. It can be followed by time expressions or prepositional phrases. Only later could we increase the budget, or only with a great effort were they able to fix the car. And it can be also followed by a conjunction. Then we have the inversion in the main clause. Here in the example we can see it. Only if the weather improves will the event take place. And there are a number of expressions that can also imply inversion. In no way, at no time, under no circumstances, or on no account. Here we have some examples. At no time during the operation did the patient regain consciousness, or under no circumstances, which is restrictive at the beginning, can refunds be given. There are some other structures, such as not, followed by only, a time expression, or a person or thing. Not only is he late, he hasn't even brought a present. Not since recourse began has unemployment been so high, or not a single stone was left unturned in the search. A typical structure for inversion is the one produced by no sooner than. In the example, no sooner had the project started than we ran out of money. Or clauses beginning with neither or nor. They have no intention of paying, and neither have we. Or we could not face the client, and nor could the manager. Another structures are clauses beginning with may, describing a wish, which is very strong, and this is not a very common use. For example, may he live to regret that decision, or after fronted comparisons with also such and so. This is very typical in formal English. The chief engineer is refusing to work under these conditions, and so are the rest of her team. Another typical inversion is subject and verb inversion. We can invert verb and subject after prepositional phrases, or adverbs of place, or adverbs of time. And then we use a form of to be or verbs of place and movement, such as stand, sit, come, go, etc. Here have examples. With place adverbs or prepositional phrases, we have, here lies the body of our son. Or, all along one wall climbed a rambling rose. We have the same thing with time adverbs. For example, then came the most difficult stage in the process, or that was the end of the explanation. Next is the discussion. This pattern, as we can see, is very widely used to establish a link with the information in the previous sentence. That's why it's important in formal English and in academic English. We have to take into account a very important fact. We do not use inversion if the subject of the clause is a pronoun. For example, we can say, here comes the sun with no pronoun, or here it comes, but we cannot say, here comes it. Let's move on to fronting. The most important type of fronting is the fronting of adjective or adverbial phrases. We can place these elements at the beginning of the sentence to give emphasis. It implies the inversion of the subject and a form of to be. This is very typical with comparative and superlative adjectives, such as in the examples. Much more interesting was the second act, or I love monuments in Rome. Best of all is the Colosseum. Here we have inversion, as we can see. Another typical expression is the one with so plus adjective plus a that clause. This is very typical. So intense was the heat that the computer collapsed. Or we have another possibility with also plus an adverbial phrase. Also at the funeral service were several politicians. And a very, very common way of fronting occurred with such. They were poor, such was the fate of most children in the area. Some other possibilities are adverbial phrases describing position. This is very typical. And here we have a connection of fronting elements. At the back of the house was a big garden. Standing in the corner of the garden was a massive tree, towered over the roof. Attached to the roof was an antenna. We can see we connect a sequence of fronted elements. It is typical also with infinitive clauses. I have written the manager several times. To meet her is my wish. This is the emphasized element. And infinitive also in this type of expressions occurs without to, if it echoes or reproduces an earlier verb. For example, he said he would arrive on time, and arrive on time he did. Very important thing happens when we confront verbs and adjectives with the particles as and though. Here we have two examples. Try as he might, he couldn't release the bulb. Or with an adjective, tired though she was, she never gave up. Another type of fronting occurs with objects and complements, and in this case we have a very literary use of the language, very formal. And we can front previously mentioned objects or complements. Here we have an example. The house had 2 wings and a dark attic. She spent long hours in the garden. The attic she rarely visited. Ben awaited his new roommate, and he hoped that he was intelligent and talkative. Then Peter arrived. Intelligent he certainly was, but in every other way Ben was disappointed. Here we have a very formal use of the language in literature. As we can see, inversion and fronting of elements in a sentence is very important in formal, academic, and written English, and it is very common way. They are very common ways of giving emphasis, and it is very important to know how they work in order to write well and to emphasize the right element in a sentence or in a text. I hope this was useful for you, and thank you very much for your attention.